For 15 years, retired teacher Linda Morrison never suspected a thing. Her son wasn't just helpful, he was stealing from her, carefully, systematically. And by the time she discovered the truth, he'd taken almost everything. But here's what makes this story different. Linda wasn't some vulnerable elderly woman easily fooled. She had spent 40 years teaching teenagers how to spot lies, manipulate evidence, and think critically. So how did her own son deceive her for over a decade? The answer is more disturbing than you think. At 69, Linda Morrison had just retired from teaching high school English and critical thinking. 4 decades in the classroom, hundreds of students taught to question everything, to look for inconsistencies, to never accept things at face value. She was sharp, always had been. The kind of teacher who could spot a plagiarized essay from the first sentence, who knew when a student was lying about why their homework was late, who could read a room and detect tension nobody else noticed. But when it came to her son, Derek, 42-year-old Derek, she never applied those skills, because that's not what mothers do. Mothers don't audit their children. They don't cross-examine them. They don't treat every conversation like a potential deception. They trust. And Derek had spent his entire adult life learning exactly how much his mother trusted him. It started so simply, so innocently. About 6 months after Linda's husband died, Derek's father, the paperwork began piling up. Insurance documents, pension statements, property tax notices, the kind of bureaucratic avalanche that follows any death. Linda was grieving, overwhelmed, and Derek was there. "Mom, let me handle this," he'd say. "You shouldn't have to deal with this right now." At first, it was just organizing documents, making phone calls, explaining things in simpler terms when the legal language became too dense. Linda appreciated it. What child wouldn't step up during their parents' hardest moment? But here's where it gets interesting. Derek didn't just help. He slowly, almost imperceptibly, began taking over. "Hey mom, this bank account is outdated. Let me get you set up with something that has better interest rates. This insurance policy is too complicated. Let me consolidate things so you don't have to track so many statements. Dad had investments all over the place. Let me streamline everything into one account. It'll be so much easier for you." Every suggestion made sense. Every change seemed helpful. And critically, every single move gave Derek more access. Over the next 3 years, he convinced Linda to add him to her bank accounts just in case of emergencies, to give him power of attorney so he could handle things if she got sick, to make him co-owner of certain assets for estate planning purposes. Linda signed everything, not because she was incompetent, not because she didn't read the documents, but because the person asking was her son, the boy she'd raised, the man who was taking time out of his busy life to help his aging mother. Why would she question that? Here's what makes Derek's deception so sophisticated. He never took large amounts at once, no dramatic withdrawals that would trigger alarm bells, no sudden emptying of accounts. Instead, he bled her finances slowly, a transfer here, a reimbursement there, small amounts that seemed reasonable in isolation. "Hey mom, I paid that contractor for you. Can you reimburse me?" Except there was no contractor. "The insurance company needed that payment. I covered it from my account, so I'm just moving it back." Except he'd already paid it months ago and was charging her twice. "Your property tax was due, so I took care of it." Except he inflated the amount by $3,000 and pocketed the difference. For 12 years, this continued, and Linda noticed nothing. Well, that's not entirely true. She noticed small things, moments where numbers didn't quite align with her memory, statements that seemed slightly off, but every time doubt crept in, Derek had an explanation ready. And the explanations always made sense, almost. "You're probably thinking of last year's amount, Mom. Property taxes went up. Remember, we consolidated those accounts, that's why it looks different. You're retired now, you don't need to track every penny like you used to." That last one was particularly insidious, because it planted a seed that questioning him meant she was being unnecessarily controlling, mistrusting, unable to let go. What kind of mother doesn't trust her own son? The first real crock appeared on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Linda was looking through her filing cabinet for an old tax return, nothing dramatic, just routine organization, when she found two statements for the same checking account. Same month, same year, different balances. She stared at them for a long time. One showed $47,000, the other showed $31,000, a $16,000 discrepancy. Her first thought was that it must be a bank error. Her second thought was to ask Derek. He handled most of this stuff anyway. But something stopped her. That old teacher instinct, the one that recognized when something was wrong even before she could articulate what. Instead of calling Derek, she started digging, quietly, methodically, the way she used to grade essays, line by line, looking for inconsistencies. She pulled out every bank statement for the last 5 years, every investment summary, every property tax record, and she began cross-referencing. What she found made her stomach turn. Patterns emerged. Discrepancies that Derek had carefully concealed began revealing themselves when viewed side by side. Transfers that didn't match up, payments for services that were billed twice, reimbursements for expenses that had already been covered. The most chilling discovery came when she found emails, her own emails, that she didn't remember sending. Messages to her bank authorizing transfers, requests to her investment advisor to liquidate assets, her name, her email address, but she didn't write them. Linda didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, she did what she'd trained herself to do for 40 years. She gathered evidence. She requested complete records from every financial institution. She compared signatures on documents. She tracked every single transaction Derek had made on her behalf. The scope of it was staggering. Over 15 years, her son had systematically stolen over $340,000 from her. Not all at once, not in a way that would trigger automatic fraud alerts, but slowly, patiently, deliberately. He'd refinanced her house, the house she owned outright, and pocketed the loan money. She'd signed the papers thinking it was something else entirely. He'd sold stock her husband had left her, claiming the market was down and they needed to cut losses, then kept the proceeds. He'd charged her for home repairs that never happened, medical expenses that were already covered, legal fees for services he never rendered. And here's the truly devastating part. He'd been doing this while visiting her every week, while having dinner with her, while acting like the devoted, caring son. The lie wasn't just financial, it was emotional. Every hug was a lie. Every "I love you, Mom" came from someone actively robbing her. But what Linda struggled with most wasn't the money, it was the time. 15 years of her life had been lived under a completely false assumption. 15 years of trusting someone who was betraying her daily. How many conversations had been manipulations? How many acts of kindness had been cover for theft? When Linda finally confronted Derek, she didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply laid out the evidence, piece by piece, the way she used to dismantle a student's weak argument. She watched his face go through the predictable stages: shock, denial, anger, then finally justification. "You don't even need that money, Mom. You're comfortable. I have a family to support. I was going to pay you back. You were going to leave it all to me anyway." Each excuse more grotesque than the last. What Linda struck most was how he never actually apologized, never showed genuine remorse, because to him, this had never been wrong. It had been practical, smart even. He'd convinced himself he was entitled to it. Linda pressed charges. Derek was convicted of elder financial abuse and fraud. He served 4 years in prison. The money, most of it was gone, spent, unrecoverable. But Linda didn't think of herself as a victim. She thought of herself as someone who learned the hardest lesson of her teaching career far too late. The most convincing lies aren't told by strangers. They're told by the people you love most, the people you raised, the people who know exactly which parts of you to weaponize. And the reason they're so effective isn't because you're stupid or weak. It's because questioning them feels worse than being deceived. Today, Linda volunteers with organizations that help elderly people recognize financial abuse. She teaches them the signs she missed, the red flags she ignored. Because the truth is, it can happen to anyone, even a teacher who spent 40 years teaching others how to think critically. The difference between intelligence and wisdom, she now says, is this. Intelligence is knowing how to spot a lie. Wisdom is accepting that the people you love most are capable of telling them. If someone you know is handling your finances, here are 3 questions you should ask yourself. Do you still have independent access to all your accounts? Can you verify every transaction they make on your behalf? And most importantly, would they let you audit them without getting defensive? If the answer to any of these is no, it's time to start asking questions. What do you think? Was Linda naive for trusting her son, or was Derek just that manipulative? Let me know in the comments below.